Our reading today is by Julian J. Soto, and it's called We Hold Hope Close. In this community, we hold hope close. We don't always know what comes next, but that cannot dissuade us. We don't always know just what to do, but that will not mean that we are lost in the wilderness. We rely on the certainty beneath the foundation of our values and ethics. We are the people who return to love like a North Star and to the truth that we are greater together than we are alone. Our hope does not live in some glimmer of an indistinct future. Rather, we know the way to the world of which we dream, and by covenant and the movement forward of one right action and the next, we know that one day we will arrive at home. Amen. Okay. It is an interesting bunch of questions this time. Dear Reverend Marcia, what is God? Okay. This is one of those questions where I remember some, there might be a fact, and some there will definitely be one person's opinion. This is really clearly the one person's opinion line on this one, on this question. Okay. What is God? What is God to me? To me, myself, that's it, just me. God is a creative force in the universe, found in the natural world, in trees and rocks and water and land, and found in relationships between people. I don't believe that God is omnipotent. I don't believe that God decides who lives, who dies, or who wins the football game, because if she did, we'd have to have a really serious discussion on the Holocaust. And yet, to me, there is some creative force in the universe that I am comfortable calling God, that I lean into and rest into and know that I am not alone. Followed by, what is your favorite dinosaur and why? I think, my kids are in their 20s now, and I am not as up to date on my dinosaurs as I once was. I gotta tell you, I think the Triceratops are like the big plant eaters, right? Is that correct? Who's a child of a parent of a small? They're meat eaters? Okay, so brontosaurus, so what are the ones that I'm thinking? Brontosauruses are the ones with the really big necks that just eat plants? Okay, we'll go with a brontosaurus. We'll go with the brontosaurus because vegetarianism. Okay. How can we express what Unitarian Universalism is about and what we believe? This is the elevator speech. We talked about the elevator speech last week. You get to come up with your own elevator speech. The elevator speech, for those of you who weren't here last week, is you get on the elevator at General Assembly with your Unitarian Universalist t-shirt on the 7th floor, and somebody says, what's a Unitarian Universalist? And you have between like floor 7 and floor 0 to answer that question. And you get to answer that question in whatever way you want. My answer to that question, Kirsten, I know I have to send you this. Sorry about that. I didn't do it yet. Thank you, Kirsten. My answer to this question is Unitarian Universalism is a liberal religious faith that believes in something greater than ourselves, and what that something is varies widely. It can be God, it can be science, it can be the power of gathered humanity. But we believe that we are greater together than we are individually. We believe that our job is to make this world a better place in the here and now because we don't know what happens afterwards. That's my answer. You get to come up with your own. Do you have a mnemonic phrase to remember the new name for Atkinson Memorial Church? Yes, Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Willamette Falls. That's the mnemonic phrase. Sorry, I don't have anything better than that. Why can't we celebrate more holidays here, like the UU Church in Cincinnati? They celebrate Groundhog Day and Jewish holidays, etc. I think it depends on what you mean by celebrate. No, we do not have cake for Groundhog's Day, sorry. But we talk a lot about Jewish holidays, for example. Joyce can vouch for that, yes. You know, my line is I preach more often about Jewish holidays than I do about Christian holidays, because there are 3 really good holidays for preaching in the Jewish tradition, and they're really Christmas and Easter in the Christian tradition. So we do celebrate some Jewish holidays. We celebrate some Christian holidays. We acknowledge things like Mother's Day and Father's Day and other things. So if you have other ideas, let me know. In your opinion, is the 6 new things principles better than the 8 principles? I don't think one is better or worse. I like that the 6 elements are easier to remember, to be honest. I like the idea of being centered in love. So last week, we talked about the Article 2 Commission. Article 2 is the principles and purposes of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And there is a new Article 2 proposed that they will take to General Assembly for a vote this year to study it for another year. Those 6 principles are interdependence, justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, and generosity. And they are all done in like a pattern around love, which is at the center. I find that easier to remember than the 8 principles. And so in that sense, I like it. I also think that they are more, I like that we're a living tradition. I like that we move with the times, and as we think about things differently, we come up with new language for that. I appreciate that. Was Doubting Thomas the first Unitarian? I think that the Unitarians would say that Jesus was the first Unitarian, because Jesus didn't claim to be divine. But I can see the question. That makes some sense, because we tend to doubt. We tend to, you know, the idea of doubting Thomas. And wanting to feel the stigmata in Jesus's hands. We do tend to want to ask scientific questions and to have them answered and to be shown for ourselves. We want to see that something is true and that something feels true deep inside of ourselves. And so I think in that sense, sure, I can see that. Does religious freedom mean that one group can dictate to everybody else what they should do or believe? No. How has participating in a Unitarian Universalist church supported my children's growth and development? I think that growing up in a Unitarian Universalist congregation gave my kids a sense of limitless possibility. Neither one of my daughters is heterosexual. I am so grateful that they grew up not only in a family, but in a congregation and a church that taught them that that was fine, that there was nothing wrong with that. I am grateful that they were taught that they get to have their own belief system. My eldest daughter was baptized as an Episcopalian a year ago. And so the idea that she grew up in this congregation meant that she had the freedom to choose that. And I respect and appreciate that. My younger daughter is not a participant in any religious organization and may not be, but I think she appreciates the ability to question that she grew up with in Unitarian Universalist congregations. Why don't Unitarians proselytize more? Because we are super afraid of that one religion is the one that you have to believe, etc. And we're really scared of that, I think. And so we tend to not talk about it. We also tend to be people who hang out in spaces that are more liberal and perhaps have fewer church-going friends. And so I know one of my favorite sermons that I preached many, many years ago was called Coming Out About Church, where I talked about the fact that in my social network, it was much easier to say that I was a lesbian than it was to say that I went to church every week. I'm not kidding. It was, you tell people in my social circle that you go to church every week and they make all sorts of terrible assumptions about you. And so I think that we are in some ways afraid to proselytize. We are afraid of being judged because we got some more questions about this in a little bit. Because Christianity these days, because the people who are loudest about Christianity, which is not Christian in my book, but the people who are loudest about their Christianity believe things that we find awful, to be honest, sometimes. And so it is harder for us to say, hey, there's a different way of doing it. I really wish that we were better about not necessarily proselytizing, but that we were better about saying, hey, this is what I do on Sunday mornings, and this is why it is important. Because I think that I am guessing that probably each of you had a moment in a Unitarian congregation, whether it was this one or a different one, where you're like, oh, I can do this. I can be this person. These are my people. And just think of how many friends you have out there who might really need that space sometimes. Yeah. So I wish we could talk more about what makes us different, what makes us who we are. And that is for each one of us going to be a little different. What is the difference between contemporary, humanist, and traditional UU services? UU services vary wildly depending on the congregation, on the minister, on the culture of the area or the culture of the congregation, on the type of music that they play, on the type of readings that they do. By traditional, I am imagining that you mean more kind of UU Christian type services. There are some churches in our denomination or congregations in our denomination that really do look more to their Christian roots. There's King's Chapel, which is a very long history of Christianity and Unitarian Christianity. Humanist, and there are some congregations where you can't say the word God. And there are some congregations where you don't use words like worship or sermon. Those might be considered humanist. I believe that humanism kind of is a thread that runs through so much of everything that we do, and that some of us are humanists who believe in God. The idea of humanism is not atheism per se. The idea of humanism is following the scientific method of believing that humans don't need a higher power in order to be good or in order to be whole people. It is also a concept that that humans are responsible for the betterment of Earth, that no one else is going to do that, that that's our responsibility. I believe, because that's what I am, that you can believe all of those things and still lean into some kind of higher power that you may or may not call God. But that doesn't mean that I believe that that God is going to, fix the earth and we can do whatever we want to it. Contemporary, I think probably the words I think probably what you mean by contemporary is more modern music, or perhaps more gospel music. There are different churches the big church in Tulsa combined the big Unitarian church in Tulsa and was joined by a Black AME congregation that joined them, and they have super rich music and worship in their congregation based on both of those values and worship styles. So it just kind of depends on what you have in your congregation. How do I teach my kids about different religions? And how do I explain what we believe as Unitarian Universalists? Is it a specific religion? I think you teach your kids about different religions in the same way that you teach your kids about different family structures. You read books about people who celebrate different holidays. You read books about people from different cultures. You watch television shows or movies about kids and families from different cultures and religions. And I think it is important to do that. And in the same way, it's important to talk about different family structures in kind of a positive way, like, all families are good, that you want to do that about religions. We can talk about all religions in a positive way without saying that this is the only truth. We can say some people believe X, and some people believe Y, and some people believe Z, and we believe you. Wow, sorry. We believe you, and this is why. This is, we believe that everyone gets to make their own decisions about what they believe, but we believe that kindness and compassion and justice are, the most important things in a faith tradition. We don't all believe the same thing about God or believe the same thing about what happens after we die, but we believe the same thing about being kind and compassionate and justice-centered, and we can share that. How can we best support our transgender youth? Advocate for them, call them by their names, use their correct pronouns. If you mess up, just correct it quickly and move on. Don't make a huge deal out of it. Our trans youth right now are just, the things that are happening all over the country are terrifying and horrific. And so I think we need to let our kids and our youth know that they are beloved and safe among us and where they are and as who they are. And that is not true in a lot of places. And so I think it's important that we let folks know who we are and what we value and what we believe, and that they are okay and beloved exactly as they are. If you could describe this congregation as a kitchen utensil, what would it be and why? I had to think about this one for a second. I think a salad bowl, because we contain a lot of diversity, and everyone gets to remain like who they are. You get to be a radish, and you get to be a tomato, and you get to be a leaf of lettuce, and we all are better together than we are, just munching on a leaf of lettuce. But I think also it's a salad bowl that has like a plant drainage thing, because you don't have to stay here. You always have the choice to leave, to go someplace else. If being part of the salad is not working for you, there is an out, and that is okay. But I think like the out is somewhere like up on the side. You're not just going to fall out of the bottom, but if you want to get out, you can. That's what I'm saying. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, today is, there was always, or, in the 4 or 5 times that I've done this so far, there's almost always been one question that has several different cards. One year it was very much about Trump, and I just put the 5 Trump questions aside and preached on that later. But we are fine now. I am going to look here for a second. What does our church do to encourage new members to join? Someone asked. That's a really good question. We have Path to Membership classes. We warmly welcome people. And we also realize that you can be a really fundamental part of this congregation without becoming a member. It is okay to just be a friend. But we also want to give people the chance when they really hit that point where they're like, this is my place. This is the place that I belong to, and I want to belong, and I want to support it, and I want to be more fully a part of this whole congregation. Then we encourage you to join, and we have a Path to Membership class that we do 3 or 4 times a year. And so that's probably the best way to do that. But how do we make people want to be here is we try and be a welcoming congregation. We try and greet people when they come in and talk to folks, and get them name tags and encourage them to sign up for tidings, and so they know what's going on and they can make the choice. It is always a red flag for me when somebody wants to join instantly, and I kind of discourage that. I'm like, no, you have to be here for a couple months first, because I am going to disappoint you at some point. You are going to walk in and you are going to think that we are the greatest thing since sliced bread, and you are going to want to, be a member yesterday, and I'm going to say, that's so great, I'm so happy for you. Why don't you stick around for a little while and see several services, because there will be a point where we are not perfect. There will be a point where I will disappoint you. There will be a point when somebody says something a little dumb. And you have to know that this is a place that is big enough to hold all of that. We are not perfect. We are not going to be perfect. But if you have been here long enough so that you have seen something and you keep coming back, that's when we want you to be a member. Okay. The 3 questions here that all feel kind of related to me this time. Will Christians ever realize that Jesus never taught to hate? I find myself connecting more and more with Christian beliefs in my own spiritual journey. However, I have trouble reckoning with the misogyny, homophobia, hate, and conservatism that Christianity has become synonymous with. How can I identify with Christianity and still feel included in the space where I feel excluded? And what do you say to people that come from anti-gay churches that say homosexuality is a sin, and it says that throughout the Bible, and Jesus was against it? I'm going to answer those questions kind of at the same time in one sort of few minutes of conversation. I talk a lot about who is talking the loudest about Christianity. I think that I truly believe that Christianity, as it is meant to be, can be an incredibly loving, giving faith tradition that encourages folks to feed the hungry and love their neighbor. That is this big underlying chunk of Christianity. And I am really, really, really pissed off that so many people are not following that definition of Christianity. One of my lines is that if you believe that Jesus talked about abortion and homosexuality and not at feeding the hungry and loving their neighbor, you have not read the book. You are hearing stuff about the book that is not in the book. And I'm going to tell you about an experience that I had when I was in clinical pastoral education. So I was doing hours in a hospital. And there was a gentleman who came in who needed back surgery. He was a very, very large person, so I think that back surgery was perhaps more frightening for him because his chances of coming out of it were a little less than they might have been for another person. And I walked in, and like the first thing he said to me was, "Pastor, I have 7 kids, and I love all my kids, and they're all, good kids, and they're all right with the Lord, except for my middle son, and he is gay, and I know for a fact that that is the one sin that Jesus can't forgive. That is worse than being a thief, because that's what my minister told me." And I tried to answer that question with biblical facts. And I said, well, the Bible does say that homosexuality is wrong in Leviticus, in the same page where it says that, you can't eat shrimp or shellfish or wear mixed fibers or shave your beard. So we don't really listen to that. And the other place that they talk about homosexuality is Paul and Acts, and it talks about homosexuality being wrong on the same page that it says that women shouldn't cut their hair or wear red in church. And so these are things that we don't believe anymore. And this was not getting anywhere with this gentleman. He's just like, yeah, but my pastor told me, and I believe him. And I'm like, okay. So I went to the chaplain at the church, and I said, how do I do this? We are taught as chaplain volunteers to just be supportive listeners, and I can't, in good conscience, do that in this case. And she told me about the iceberg theory. And the iceberg theory is that there is this little part of the iceberg that goes up from the water. And that's the issue that they're talking about. But the iceberg, 90% of it is underneath the water. And that I didn't have to talk about that piece. I could talk about this piece. And so the next time I went in to talk to this gentleman, and he was saying, the same things, I could say with integrity, wow, you must really love your son. I can hear how much you love your son and how scary this must be for you. It does not say that throughout the Bible. It doesn't. And if you can get somebody who can, listen to those facts and can make some headway there, great. If you can't, I can hear how much you love your son. I can hear how worried you are about this. How can we talk about this? Because I know that you love your kid or your neighbor or whatever. I believe that there are lots of Christian beliefs and Christian practices that you can hold. And I am really sorry that the loudest people are the ones who are preaching hate. Especially right now with the right and their sort of culture wars for the heart of America, where they are really doubling down on trans folks and anti-gay bills in schools and things like that. They are trying desperately to maintain power in a world where they are not the majority anymore, and they are slipping away. And so they are trying to find things that hit the queasy or moral disgust buttons in some people and fight on those methods. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. We know better. It's going to make things really miserable for a lot of people for a long time, and that crushes me. But it's not going to work in the long term. We know better. We know better. So to identify with Christianity and feel included in spaces where you feel excluded, surround yourself with people who believe as you do, and there are lots of people out there like that. When my daughter became an Episcopalian, people were like, well, how did you feel about that? And I said, well, here was my question. Honey, I'm really happy that you're going to become an Episcopalian. That's totally fine. I just want to make sure that your church doesn't preach that your mother is going to hell. Because, for any one of 3 or 4 reasons, that I'm a Unitarian, that I'm gay, that I'm a minister, that whatever else. She's like, of course, Mom, I would never go to a church like that. And there are a lot of really good liberal Christian churches out there. And so if that is what you need, and you are also welcome to have a personal spiritual practice here that reflects Christianity. We have people who meditate and draw on Buddhism. We have people who practice Jewish holidays and draw on their Judaism. We have people who read the Bible or read liberal Christian authors, and pray to God and pray through Jesus. And those are all fine things to do in a Unitarian Universalist church. You get to have your own path and your own belief system. And this is one of the things that I really love about this congregation, is that we are not afraid of traditional religious language. Not everyone embraces it, for sure, and that's fine, but we are a place where if someone else is using religious language, people don't get up and walk out. There are places where they actually do that, and I'm so grateful this is not one. When I use religious language, I try and define my terms. So when I am talking about God, this is what I mean by God. And mostly, my version of God isn't terribly scary or controversial to most people here, so that works fairly well for me. There you have it. The last question is, what is your favorite hymn? And I kept that for last because it's the one we're going to sing right now. It is 10:21. It is Lean On Me.